Hey, thanks for checking out today's video. My name is Brendan. If you've never been to the channel before, I'm a product designer for a SaaS company based in Los Angeles, and I have 2.5 years of experience. I'm on YouTube to be able to show my design process and just kind of share all the tips and tricks that I've learned over my time as a product designer. So over the past few weeks, I've been going through the concept project that I'm working on for my portfolio, and we've gone through the series introduction and then the first two videos, which are the user research videos. So if you haven't checked those out, make sure to do so. And I'm going to include those in the description so that way you can get the playlist. But in today's video, we're going to be going through the UX UI audit, which is where I'm finding all of the usability issues and ultimately looking into the user flows a little bit deeper. That way I really get to understand what I'm going to be solving and basically what the case study is really going to be all about. And then in next week's video, we're going to be going through the design research and the mocks. And then from there, we're going to go into user testing and then make the case study. So we are about halfway through, and I'm really excited to show you guys what I found today. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, the product that I'm using, Jira, it's a pretty popular tool for software development teams, which is why I used it. I wanted people like yourself that may or may not be in a team at this point get familiar with the tool, but also for those that are checking out my case studies to have a sense of what the product is already. That way they can get a sense of like how I improved it, because it's something that they're probably going to be familiar with. Now, Jira is owned by a company at Lacian that has about 7,200 employees on LinkedIn. And of those, there's like 900 product design employees specific to Jira. So I wasn't expecting to find as many usability issues as I did. So I think this video is going to become very valuable for you guys to see like what I discovered. But yeah, I got to be honest, I was pretty shocked when I found as many as I did. So in today's video, the first thing that we're going to do is go through the user flows that we can get a sense of what I focused on. And then secondly, we're going to go through the template that I used. I took a framework off of one template, but then I created my own. So I'm going to show you that, and I'm going to include that in the description as well. That way you have the resources available to you if you wanted to use them on your own. And then lastly, I'm actually going to take you through 10 of the 20 usability issues that I found. And these 10 are going to be the top prioritized usability issues. So with that said, let's go ahead and get into the video. All right, so on the screen here, I have the first user flow. I'm showing you basically two slight variations of the same user flow, and the way that they slightly vary is just based on answering screens 2 and 3. If you skip the question, which is what I did in the top section, I wanted to see if it was going to change anything, just based on if you're going to ask a personalized questions, I would expect the flow to slightly change. That actually wasn't the case. And I wanted to show that here because I think that if you're going to ask questions in order to try to figure out what the user needs, you really should tailor it in the back end. And so I'm showing this really is just a way to like point out one just really bad like user experience in my opinion. Like, why add two questions if it's not going to make a difference? Overall, I kind of mentioned this in another video. Overall, I felt like the user flow the first time that I used it was fairly solid. There were 10 screens, I believe, in total. When I was going through it, it didn't take very long. And that's the thing. This user flow wasn't that tedious. It just wasn't that valuable for me as the user. It was asking a lot of questions that a system needs to understand, but really wasn't helping me get onboarded with the product. So for the last screen here, as I mentioned, there are 10. The last screen is just basically showing you where it leaves you after you're done with the user flow. Now, with each step of this first user flow, there were some steps where I felt like could be valuable, and I'll sort of drill into that when we get into some of the UX issues. This is a really good example of how you can ask questions in a way that make it easier to get through without it just being a laundry list of questions. But it led me, no matter how I filled it out, it led me to the exact same templates. Just kind of weird how no matter what information you put in, it's just not going to give me anything specialized. So I find that to be frustrating. I think that Maybe if I kept playing around with it and tried various different ways of signing up, that it could have changed. But in any event, just found that a little bit odd. So that's the first user flow. We're going to get into the details here in a second. Another user flow, which I hadn't accounted for initially, is this quick start. It's not really much of a flow as much as it is just a quick way of seeing all of the different ways that you can use the product. So I just wanted to show these things mainly because I feel like if you're going to get onboarded, I think that these two user flows can kind of play together. They kind of do. Like, it takes you from one to the next, but I think some of what is here in user flow 2 can be added in user flow 1, so that when you get into the first screen, which is basically the sprint board, which is where you would begin to start creating tasks and whatnot, it would be nice if you already had a familiarity with this quick start information and you could just start getting to work, which is what all the other competitors pretty much are doing it for their users. Like, if you think of Asana or ClickUp, you're not having to go through a quick start for the most part. They have that, but it's pretty intuitive, and I don't think it is the same for this tool. So that's why it's even more imperative in my mind to show it in the onboarding, because the UI has so much explaining that is missing. Now, for this user flow number 3, we're talking about creating an issue. It's true for, creating an issue, creating a story, creating an epic. They're all pretty much going to be the same kinds of flow. Creating a bug, and then there's creating a sprint down below. I don't want to get into the usability issues yet, so I just want to kind of show you in this first few minutes here where I'm focusing my time. We've kind of gone over it in the first few videos of some of the user flows that I assumed and anticipated I was going to be focusing on, but this is where I ended up going. So the onboarding flow, creating issues, creating sprints, creating bugs, epics, those are the primary user flows that we're going to be focusing on. So now let's go ahead and get into the template that I use. So first off, I want to give a shout out to Fulcrum. They are a UX UI audit agency, and they have this really nice template that they provide. It's as simple as just sign. I think it's you just sign up for an email. Let me see here. So they offer UX UI audits if you want one, but then you can also just download their free one, which is what I did. Yeah, you just sign up and then you'll get the email. This is what it ends up looking like. So it's a Notion template. They have some information about themselves in the beginning, and then you can click into the UX UI audit checklist. They have various different levels depending on what you're interested in. The middle level is the one that I used. It's the heuristic analysis. So heuristic analysis is a pretty common way to find usability issues, introduced most popularly by the Nielsen Norman Group, and they link their videos in here so you can follow along. The reason I like this template specifically is because they ask yes or no questions, which makes it easier to go through the heuristic. So I'm just going to start with this first one, visibility of system status. In a nutshell, as it says here on the screen, what it's trying to summarize is just the communication of the current state allows you to feel control over the system, take appropriate actions to reach the goal, and ultimately trust the brand. The visibility of system status is a basic tenet of great user experience, and at its core, it encourages open and continuous communication. So it's hard sometimes to look at an application and then try to figure out how to apply this heuristic in a way to figure out if it's even following that heuristic. So having these questions gives you a place to start. So let's just read one off here. If the system processes a request for more than 3 seconds, is the loader displayed, and is there a hint of how much time the process will take? So if I click into this, it's going to give me even more information. Now I will say that not every single card is equal. So some cards don't have any information, but nonetheless, it's a free resource. So this really helped me. They give some examples here. And this is really how I found a lot of the usability issues that I did find. So that is a great resource. Like I said, I'll link it in the description, but feel free to just go over to fulcrum.rocks/UX audit and you can sign up for yourself. They have a newsletter that you could be a part of, and I think it's just worth getting put into the newsletter, so that way you have all of the updates that could be coming with that system. Because one other thing to mention is, if you click back a step, there are a few that they still don't have the cards filled out for. They have like the bare bones kind of set up here, but they don't have the cards yet, which to me is not that big of an issue because, like I said, I had success with it. So as you can see here in the source, they're pretty much all coming from the Fulcrum. And in fact, these ones are too. I just hadn't filled them out. I think there was only one usability issue that we're going to go over today that wasn't found through that audit. So with that said, let's go ahead and transition over to the usability issues. We're going to go over 10. The way that I rank these issues is the same system that Nielsen Norman Group uses, which is, you can see it here in the tags column. It's a 1 through 4. And so we'll start at the 1. I only found one cosmetic issue, and there were definitely more, but I just didn't really care to add more than I needed. Like, this to me gives me everything I need for the concept project. If I was working, if I actually worked at this company, I'm sure I could have found 100 and just kept listing them out. And this is how you build a design backlog. This is how you start to prioritize issues, is with these this rating system. So then we have some minor issues, which we're not going to get into, and then the major, and then the catastrophe. So with that said, first one here is the onboarding user flow took too long and wasn't personalized based on filling out the personalized questions. So the observation I kind of mentioned, the 2 questions on the page did not change the experience whatsoever, which kind of made them useless at the end of the day. If you're going to ask personalizing questions, give me something at the end, so that way I feel like it's adding value. Otherwise, why would you ever not skip? Of course, you're not going to know that going into it, but it's just bad usability. And especially when you have one question per page, that's also pretty frustrating. That user flow, I really think, could be probably more like 6 or 7 pages versus 10. That's just less clicks. And I still think you can actually make it more valuable by having things from the quick start in the 6 pages. So it would take less time and you would learn more and know more going into the system. So recommendation is to customize the onboarding experience based on the personalized responses, shorten the user flow down to only the screens that are essential for getting started. So that's the first one. All right, so the second one here is also related to onboarding. So the onboarding flow fails to educate and set up the user for success out the gate. The goal of my concept project is to make this tool work right out the box. That way, people don't have to go into settings and finagle with things just to get it to work the way that they were hoping to. So that's what we're going to be doing in this next video. We're going to go over the design research and the mocks, and you're going to see that the onboarding, in my opinion, which is why we're going to be doing user testing, so that it's just not going to be based on my own opinion, but ultimately is going to make it easier for the user to get started, especially for the smaller teams that are going to be quickly growing with the product. But even for the big teams that they're going to want to have the flexibility to customize the UI. And I think that customization early on is just an easier flow. Enough rambling. Let's go into the observations. So the 10 screen flow does not really help the user to onboard outside of selecting a few system questions that are required to show your project. You'll have to go to settings to actually get the project set up and how you want it. Recommendation is to help the user to not only onboard through system questions that are basically getting required to ask. So as I was kind of mentioning, it feels like they're just questions for the system. We want to help them configure their project so they can get started out the gate, like I mentioned, without having to finagle. Third usability issue, which is also a catastrophe. When creating a sprint, I filled out the modal. Now I'm going to show you that first. And I can actually just talk through this one. So there's going to be 2 flows that are related to the sprint. One is, creating the sprint and then closing the sprint. So we're talking specifically about creating the sprint. When I went to hit create sprint, you can see the start sprint button here. And this is why I laid it out so that it would be easier to come back and look through how the flow works. I, for whatever reason, okay, so sorry, let me back this up. So we were here, we didn't have any dates, as you can see in this next screen. So I had to hit add dates. Then I added those dates within this modal. Once I was done adding those dates, I hit the update button, which then asked me to then start the sprint, to go back to the exact same modal, the exact same questions, and then I had to hit start. And I just felt like that was a really odd experience to have to go to the same modal twice just to start the sprint. And I don't know if it was just because I didn't add the dates, but nonetheless, you should never have to go to the same modal twice just to do the same exact action that you were intending to do, because that's just confusing to a user. So I found that to be a catastrophe simply because it could leave the user confused. Fourth, the incorrect error fix suggestion. This one actually was like seriously mind-boggling to me. Let me see. This error that you're seeing is based off of being in the start date here, this start date field. So I believe there's a couple of errors that I could talk about here, but I'm only going to get into this one so it doesn't drag. Basically, if you are going to only allow for a calendar date, you should never allow a user to be able to type in text. And so when you're in an iPhone, for example, and you are typing into a phone number field, it by default only shows you, or if you're putting in like credit card information, it's only going to show you the keypad specifically for putting in numbers most of the time. It's not going to show you, especially if you can't put in letters, you're not going to have the access on the phone to even put those in, that type of text into the field. So the problem with this was, one, you shouldn't even allow for that to happen. But the error state itself is the issue. If you notice with the error state, the invalid date format says, please enter the date in the format. It says DMMMYY. And that's clearly wrong. But yeah, like, how does this happen for a company that's 7,200 employees? I don't know. It was crazy to me that I found this. So, but to kind of get to the other one. So when I hit create a new issue, you can see the summary is required to add, but for whatever reason, it's allowing me to create the issue. This button should have already been disabled. It shouldn't allow me to hit create because there's a ton of fields, right? So if I hit it create, fortunately it does take me back to the place, but best user experience, best practice wouldn't just be to disable the state until all required fields are filled out correctly. So that would be another usability issue that's sort of related to this error state. So yeah, with that said, I'm going to go back and go to the next issue here. So the next one has to do with accessibility. And so the complete sprint buttons are not meeting accessibility guidelines. So, and by that, it's just the AA. It's not even like AAA, because I don't think that's fair to judge AAA, which just means it's the easiest to see. And I think for the most part, it's kind of challenging to meet AAA standards. If you don't know what the guideline is, what I'm talking about, I have a video on it, but it's Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And one, you should just get familiar with it. But when you're designing buttons, it's really important that people can read it. And so for this specific component, we're talking about the complete sprints button on the active sprints page. And then it's also the same button in the import issues next button. So I put the observation as the disabled state needs to still meet web accessibility. They do use a disabled state here, which is interesting because they don't use disabled states in certain modals. So just inconsistency there. For example, disabled state needs to meet web accessibility. The issue is that the only my issues in recently updated buttons are very similar. So in the UI, let me see if I can find that quickly here. It's the same exact color as this create sprint button and this insights. They're all the same. When you have a disabled button that looks identical to a button that isn't disabled, that's also a problem. So how do you make a disabled button still meet accessibility guidelines but not look exactly like this? So potentially you just need to change this create sprint button to be to look less like a disabled button. And so that there is not confusion there. The next few here. So creating an issue is confusing. We've talked about this a numerous amount of times. So why are there so many fields to create issues that only have like 1 or 2 actions that are actually required? And so my thought process on this is only show a few fields at a time when creating an issue. With that said, there is one other thing I wanted to show you guys. So I completely forgot about this exercise that I did. This was the Jira Fields card sort that I did. I think this is really valuable. In fact, I kind of feel like this could get piled deeply into this video and kind of not even get its recognition, because this exercise was super critical for me. I think creating issues, being that it is the most tedious thing to do and you have to do it the most frequently, if I can fix this user flow, we are in business, because it is about 4 user flows. It's like the epics, the stories, the bugs, and the tasks. So it relates to 4 different user flows that we're focused on. What I did is I just simply laid out, these are the different categories. Very important, creating an issue. Very important, grooming and planning, which is those ceremonies that I've mentioned in other videos. Somewhat important and not important at all. So these 3 issues are the most important. So these should be shown when you hit create issues and the modal pops up, just those 3 fields. Then the other issues here that are very important when you're actually planning, you can go through these as you're grooming or you're setting up your planning. Then for somewhat important, in my mind, these would be really good for the onboarding stage where people can turn these on or turn these off. They're already going to be default set to off, but they can basically turn them on if they need the features. So things like labels and components, as well as version effects. It's just enhancing the features. They're not required to use the system, but it will definitely link things together and make things a little more complex, which could be a good thing in this case. And then lastly, the non-important at all fields are the time tracking, the original estimate, and the reporter field. Now, some of this people probably wouldn't agree with my list here, but that's why you can take this same card sort and you can do user testing, right? So I could take all these fields and just take it to clients and see if my initial assumptions would be agreed to, or you don't even have to come up with it on your own. You can just let the clients do it. In this case, because it's a concept project, I am not going to have the time to do that. But I will say, when I do my user testing, I'm actually going to bring this to the product manager, the engineering manager, and the software engineer that I'm going to be interviewing and see if they agree with me. And so this will be a part of the case study that I'm building out. So just wanted to show this because I felt like this was potentially the most valuable thing that I did outside of finding some of the top priority usability issues. So yes, the goal would be to only show a few fields at a time when creating an issue, and help in the onboarding process add some fields if they want those enhancements. And of course, they can add those at any given time. Next one here is there isn't a way to delete a personal ticket for non-admins. So yeah, this is definitely frustrating because you have to basically move a ticket that you created for yourself into the done column, even though you didn't finish it, or you'd have to edit the workflow and add a step called canceled. But you can't do that if you're not an admin anyways. So if you're creating your own personal tickets, like your own personal tasks, you should be able to delete them. And that's just my personal opinion. That's what I'm putting here. Maybe not if somebody else created the task for you, but that just seems like a really important thing to have so that you don't clutter up your task list. You might add a ticket that somebody else created for you already, so you don't need it. Instead, you have to like cross both off. That's just kind of frustrating. I deal with that personally because I make my own design tickets, and then my product manager, if he never gets to it in time, like if he doesn't get it to it in time, then I'll make mine on my own. But then eventually he will get to it, and then I'm stuck having to basically move 2 tickets through each swim lane at a time, which is kind of frustrating. So yeah, there's that one. Then there isn't a way to cancel a ticket. So deleting and canceling just kind of roll up in the same sort of usability issue. Then the last 2 here are, it is easy to get components and labels confused with each other. So the components and labels are going to be fields that are, as I kind of mentioned in the option, it's like somewhat important fields. So I think the way that we're going to fix this is just educating users on how each field is used prior to even setting it up in the onboarding. So if we can help people understand, because I was looking at a lot of product threads, they have like a knowledge base for Jira, and that was a really commonly searched question, which is what is the difference between the two, because they're used in somewhat similar ways. I don't want to like bog you down in this video with the context because we're going to get into it in the next video. So just that was something, if you have features that are very similar and in a buzzword type of way, like until you get into it, it's really hard to tell the difference. It's really important that you educate the users so that they know which one to pick because they do different things. Lastly, moving items in the backlog is very manual and tedious. I remember talking about this in the last video too. So definitely an issue that I'm going to be focusing on. So yeah, these are all the major usability issues that I found. I will link the rest so you can read through and see what else I found. But ultimately, I'm really happy with the research that I found, and I think it leads me in a really good spot going into the next video and going into the next deliverables. As always, thanks again for checking out today's video. Every Thursday, I put out this sort of series where I'm going through a design series, and right now we're going through the concept project, and then next series is going to be the second concept project, and then we're going to be wrapping up the design portfolio that I've yet to build. And so we're going to be doing those 3 ones, closing out the year and going into next, but we've got other ones coming. So if that sounds like something you'd be interested in, make sure to subscribe. And also please do like this video so it gets shared out to other people and they can get value from this series. I'm also doing another series where every Monday I'm releasing a video talking about design tips and recommendations for things that I've used, or maybe it's like a plugin that I like to use. I just put out my first one this past Monday talking about product design interviews and 5 ways that you can stand out. So if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, also make sure to subscribe so you can see those kind of videos. As always, I like to end my videos by saying it takes 10,000 hours to master a skill. So what are you guys designing today? Let me know in the comments section. Make sure to join the Slack channel in the description that we can connect with other like-minded designers. And lastly, just make sure, like I said, to like and subscribe because it really does help get this out to everybody, and it's helping the channel grow, and I really appreciate it. So I will see you guys in the next video. Thank you so much and have a good one.